Tor Wennesland.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the Council, I am devoting my regular briefing on the situation in the Middle East to the 26th report on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2334. The Secretary General's written report that you have already received covers the period between 14 March and 14 June. Let me start by saying that the 2 weeks we have had after 14 June has been terrible. Since the submission of the written report, we have seen an alarming spike in violence across the northern and central occupied West Bank, leading to numerous Palestinian and Israeli casualties. Military occupation, including airstrikes in the West Bank, clashes, attacks, and extremely high level of settler-related violence have continued and intensified dramatically, alongside the use of more sophisticated weapons on the Palestinians, including IEDs and rocket launch towards Israel. Unless decisive steps are taken now to rein in the violence, there is a significant risk that the events could deteriorate further. The mounting violence is taking place against the backdrop of a deeply worrying settlement-related development that altered the already fragile dynamics on the ground, as well as a worrying deterioration in relationship between Israel and Palestinian Authority. In this regard, I welcome today's calls between President Isaac Herzog and Mahmoud Abbas, and between Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and PLO Secretary General Hussein al-Sheikh on the occasion of Eid, in which, according to Israeli statements released in the media, Israeli officials denounced recent settler attacks in the West Bank and recommended to holding perpetrators accountable. Madam President, on 19 June, an Israeli military operation in Jenin refugee camps in Area A of the occupied West Bank led to heavy armed exchanges. An Israeli security force vehicle was struck by Palestinian IEDs, injuring 8 ISF personnel. Palestinian Islamic Jihad claimed responsibility for the attack. According to the IDF, military helicopters carried out airstrikes, the first in the West Bank since the Second Intifada, to facilitate the extraction of military personnel and disabled vehicles. Over the course of the day, 7 Palestinians were killed by ISF, including 2 children, and 90 injured. On 20 June, 2 Palestinians shot and killed 4 Israeli civilians, including 2 children, and injured 4 others in a gas station near Eli settlement north of Ramallah. One of the perpetrators was shot and killed by an Israeli civilian at the scene, while the other was later killed by Israeli forces near Tubas. Hamas claimed the assailants as members and said the attack was a natural response, quote unquote, to the ISF operations in Jenin. From the night of 20 June to 25 June, Israeli settlers perpetrated 28 violent attacks against Palestinian villages across the northern and central occupied West Bank. In total, 1 Palestinian was killed and 54 others were injured, 37 by ISF and 16 by settlers, or 1 indeterminate, while 4 settlers or other Israeli civilians and 1 ISF personnel was injured by Palestinians. The attacks followed a similar pattern, with large number of settlers, many armed, in some cases escorted by ISF, setting fire to dozens of houses and vehicles, as well as fields owned by Palestinians, followed by confrontation, in many cases leading to casualties. In some instances, ISF fired live and rubber-coated metal bullets on the Palestinians. Same day, on 20 June, in Al-Lubnan, Al-Sharqiyah, settlers' arson also targeted a gas station and 3 Palestinians, including a child, that were injured. On 21st of June, over 300 settlers again attacked the Palestinian village of Turmuzaya, northwest of Ramallah. In the ensuing confrontation, 1 Palestinian was shot and killed by the ISF, and 8 others were injured by live ammunition. The settler ramparts continued that evening in Rif, south of Nablus, with hundreds of Israeli settlers began attacking Palestinians, their property and other structures, including a school and a mosque. Over the following days, settlers attacked villages situated between Nablus and Ramallah, including Jalud, Jinjil, Del Divan, Ushafa, Al-Mughayir, and again Tumuzaya. To date, Israeli police have said 11 Israelis have been detained, including 2 off-duty IDF personnel, in relation to the various attacks. Amid these developments, on the night of 21 June, armed Palestinians fired towards Al-Jalameh checkpoint north of Jenin. An Israeli drone subsequently launched a missile at their vehicle, killing 3 Palestinians and 1 child. The IDF said that the 3 were responsible for a number of shooting attacks in the West Bank. 2 were later claimed as members by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the 3rd by Fatah's Al-Aqsa Matir Brigades. On 26 June, Palestinians from the so-called Al-Ayas brigades attempted to launch 2 rockets from Jenin area towards Israel. Both fell short in the occupied Palestinian territory, with no damage or injuries reported. Madam President, reactions by officials to the various incidents have varied, with some rejecting the violence and condemning the vigilantism, others making deep, alarming, inflammatory statements. On 24 June, the IDF Chief of Staff, the head of the Israeli Security Agency, and the Israeli Police Commissioner issued a joint statement condemning the settler attacks, which they called nationalist terrorism, and vowing to take steps to combat them. These steps include increasing the presence of forces, stepping up arrests, and widening the use of administrative detention against individuals participating in such attacks. The previous day, an Israeli minister and cabinet member visited the illegal settlement outpost and called on settlers to, quote, run to the hilltops and establish additional outposts, illegal also under Israeli law. He also called for a widespread military campaign in the West Bank, urging ISF to, quote, blow up buildings and assassinate terrorists, not 1 or 2, but dozens, hundreds, and if needed, thousands, unquote. The minister called to establish unauthorized outposts was later repudiated by the Prime Minister Netanyahu at a cabinet meeting, where he said that calls to grab land illegally and actions of grabbing land illegally are unacceptable, unquote. And the Israeli authorities would act to stop them while promoting settlement expansion in approved locations. Meanwhile, Palestinian factions, including Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, celebrated the 20 June attack against the Israeli civilians as an, quote, act of heroism, and called for additional attacks. Madam President, several concerning developments took place during the reporting period relating to Israeli settlement expansion. On 18 June, the Israeli government approved significant amendments to Israeli settlement planning procedures that could expedite advancement of Israeli settlement plans. The amendments remove inter alia the requirement for the Minister of Defense to approve interim settlement planning stages and to delegate to the minister's authority in this regard to the additional Minister of the Defense, currently Bezalel Smotrich. In response to this decision, the Secretary General of the PLO's Executive Committee, Hussein Sheikh, announced in a tweet that the Palestinian authorities would not participate in a long-awaited meeting on the Joint Economic Committee scheduled for 19 June. The meeting had been anticipated as an important opportunity for the parties to discuss urgent steps to improve their economic relationship and deliver on existing commitments. Similarly, plans for a ministerial meeting in the Negev Forum later this summer, hosted by Morocco, were also postponed. On 26 June, the Israeli Civil Administration Higher Planning Committee reportedly advanced plans for over 5,500 housing units in Israeli settlements in Area C. Some 750 units near Ali were added to the agenda after the 20 June attack. There, and following an announcement by the Prime Minister's office that Israel's answer to terrorism is to strike at it forcefully and build up our country. Plans advanced reportedly include the retroactive regularization under Israeli law of 3 outposts adjacent to Ali. Madam President, regarding other significant developments, on 16 June, UNRWA announced that it had resumed its services delivery to Palestinian refugees in the West Bank after nearly 4 months of disruptions due to a work dispute with the West Bank staff union and a strike. UNRWA operations in the West Bank, including 42 health clinics and 19 schools for more than 40,000 children, have since fully resumed. Madam President, I will now turn to the observation regarding the implementation of the provision of Security Council Resolution 2334 during the reporting period. I remain gravely concerned by the escalating spiral of violence we are witnessing in the occupied West Bank. I condemn all acts of violence against civilians, including all acts of terror, which exacerbate mistrust and undermine a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The violence must stop, and all perpetrators should be held accountable. I'm particularly alarmed by the extreme level of settler violence, including a large number of settlers, many arms, systematically attacking Palestinian villages, terrorizing communities, sometimes in the proximity of Israeli security forces. Israel, as the occupying power, has an obligation to protect Palestinians and their property in the occupied Palestinian territory and to ensure prompt, independent, impartial and transparent investigation into all acts of violence. I reiterate that the security forces must exercise maximum restraint, apply proportional use of force, and use lethal force only when it is strictly unavoidable in order to protect life, and conduct thorough, independent, impartial, and prompt investigation into all instances of possible excessive use of force. Children, in particular, must never be targeted of violence, used, or put to harm's way. I strongly condemn insightful, provocative statements from officials of both sides that further inflame the volatile situation on the ground. Madam President, I remain deeply troubled by the relentless expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, that fuels violence and is impeding access to by Palestinians to their land and resources, reshaping geography on the occupied West Bank and threatening the viability of a future Palestinian state. I note with alarm the recent Israeli government decision, which may expedite expansion in Area C. Israeli settlements constitute a flagrant violation of the UN resolution and international law. I call on the government of Israel to cease the advancement of all settlement activity immediately. I call upon the Israeli government to end the demolition of Palestinian-owned property and prevent the possible displacement and eviction of Palestinians in line with the obligation under international humanitarian and international human rights law. I urge Israel to approve plans that would enable Palestinian communities in Area C and East Jerusalem to build legally and address their development needs. In closing, I underscore that the speed and intensity of the security deterioration we have witnessed on the ground are extremely dangerous. The unfolding events seriously challenge broader stability and undermine the Palestinian Authority. While the ceasefire following the Gaza escalation in May has helped, there is a constant risk that events in the West Bank could spill over to Gaza. Likewise, The Palestinian Authority's fiscal and institutional challenges, exacerbated by funding shortages, including for the UN agencies, that impact the delivery of crucial basic services, remain concerning and may further aggravate the deterioration on the ground. Let there be no doubt, neither the PA nor the UN will be able to provide humanitarian assistance without donors urgently stepping up financial support. In recent days and weeks, the UN has remained in close contact with all parties to help restore a relative calm and change the current disastrous trajectory. We must urgently act collectively to stop the violence. At the same time, it's crucial to bring the parties back into a path that addresses the political issues driving the current dynamics, so that the process to resolve the core issues can begin. The deepening occupation, settlement expansion, the high level of violence against civilians, including acts of terror, and critically, the absence of a political horizons are rapidly eroding hope among Palestinians and Israelis, and particularly among youth, that a resolution of the conflict is achievable. I urge all leaders to put on the brakes and rethink the options. The choice is clear. Either continue along the downward spiral of violence and provocation, leading to a political vacuum, or to turn towards constructive dialogue linked to concrete actions that can create hope and a political horizon. The UN remains committed to assisting these efforts and to supporting Palestinians and Israelis to resolve the conflict and end the occupation through the achievement of a two-state solution in line with relevant UN resolutions, international law, and bilateral agreements.